Welcome to the December meeting. This is one that I really look forward to, which I do. I look forward to almost every meeting, but this one is a little bit of an exception. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jake Byler. I have been a part of this group for a good number of years, and I really value getting around a group like this and helping to create a space for people to connect and learn from each other. If you are not on our email list and you would like to be, there's a paper on the table at the back where you can scan a QR code and drop your email to get on our list. Or my email is there as well if you want to just email me and I'll get on our list. Most of you are probably aware of our meetings are primarily paid for by sponsors, and our sponsors for this year, a couple of them I think are in the room. We have 5 sponsors for this year. We have Nate Rittenhouse from Longterm Federal Credit Union, Jeff Moore, he's on our board, he does private lending. Joe Liofsky, Compass Property Management, he's on our board as well. He actually started this meeting about 10 years ago. Dave Wolf from Principal Mortgage Group, and Daniel Esch, a good friend of mine, is right over here, local real estate agent. Daniel and some of his team have done some market updates for us in the past, so we get to hear from them once in a while. So the goal here tonight is to kick this thing off as soon as possible, because we are going to have way more to talk about tonight than what we're going to have time to talk about. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a, kind of try to set the stage a little bit, and then I'm going to get our panelists up for tonight. So who is ready to talk about short-term rentals? It's an exciting topic, at least most people seem to think that way. According to the room full of people, somebody's excited to talk about short-term rentals. So I know I am. I always love talking about it. There's always so much to learn, and it's a changing industry. It's a very broad industry, and for some reason, it just tends to get a lot of attention. It's something that is a lot more exciting than buying a row home that's 150 years old in the south side of Lancaster City. I love doing that as well. It's just not something that gets most of us warm and fuzzy like Airbnb does. So I'm going to break it down a little bit here. Okay, let me say this first. So what we're going to hopefully cover tonight is going to be what I would put into possibly like 3 different topics. We're going to hopefully cover some kind of broad overview of the short-term rental industry, the trends, and so forth, and then we're going to do some of the more specific how-to, in the weeds, guest communication, how to get bad reviews removed, some more of the fine detail, and then hopefully some just overall investment and business principles, if you will. So hopefully we'll have some combination of that coming out, so that's kind of something for everyone. And some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about specifically with short-term rentals is not going to apply to all short-term rentals. A lot of the questions that I get, and a lot of what I think creates a little bit of confusion around the space, is the fact that, so I could break this apart into kind of 4 different quadrants, if you will, like 2 different extremes of portions of the industry. And the one would be where you have a large cabin property, mansion, beachfront, whatever. Some of those rent for a couple thousand a night. Large properties, large groups of people. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you might have somebody renting out a basement apartment or a garage apartment, or even something in Lancaster City. 1 bedroom in the Airbnb. In Lancaster City, you actually can't do that anymore. But my point is, those small ones operate very, very differently than the large properties. Much easier to manage. Very, very different approach to that. And then you have people that are buying them strictly because they're making a business decision. They're buying them strictly for the return, which I would fit that category. And you have some people buying them for more of a lifestyle property. Maybe it is more for tax advantages, and some people that maybe had a cabin for the last 10, 20 years and they realize that to put it on Airbnb, have it pretty much paid for themselves. So those are very different things. If you're buying it strictly for the cash flow that you think it'll produce versus you just want to have it pay for itself and so forth. So one of the things that I think is really, really cool about getting a group of people like this together. How cool is it that most of us, all of us, can be sitting here tonight, and as David Rach and Mike and Kayla are sharing, you'll probably have at least a couple of moments where you'll be thinking to yourself, I never thought of that. How cool is it that you can actually get a download like a brand new thought? And one example of that would be the founder of Airbnb back in 2007. That started, as most of you probably know, as a guy renting out a couple air mattresses, I think, in a conference room. They first called it, I jotted that down, Airbed and Breakfast. And then became known as Airbnb, and is now something like an $85 billion developed into a massive industry that's still growing quite rapidly. So I'm going to briefly introduce the panel, and then I'm going to bring them up and have them tell you a little bit more about what they're doing, and we're going to roll into it. So we have Dave and Rachel from Perry County. They have a couple large Airbnb cabin properties. They also started managing some for other owners. Dave is also a licensed real estate agent, and they also have some long-term rentals and have a lot of exposure to that large vacation rental industry in the Perry County area. And Mike and Kayla Mapp, local here. Kayla has been managing properties for other owners for a number of years, and has been doing it very well from what I hear. Mike recently went full-time in real estate earlier this year. He's also a licensed agent, helping some owners buying and selling properties and getting asked the question, should I do Airbnb? So without further ado, help me welcome the panel up here. Start by just take a couple minutes, tell people a little bit about what you're doing, how you got here, because here's the reality. So you don't have to, they don't need to know everything about you, but if you're going to be sitting here and if you're going to say, well, I've been studying Airbnb for the last 5 years, I think I know a good bit about it, I haven't bought any yet, but here's what I think, versus if you're telling them what you actually do, they are going to be listening differently. So I think it's important that they get a little bit of a snapshot of what you have accomplished and what you're doing. So a couple minutes each, what you are currently doing, how you kind of got there, and how you spend your time. So you can start, Dave.
Sure. So we started with what was a 2-bedroom rental house. Actually, before that, we had a guest house above our garage at our house. 1-bedroom apartment that we put on Airbnb, and so that was our first exposure to that. It did really well for the middle of Perry County. So we had a 2-bedroom rental in Duncannon that we said, well, let's try this on Airbnb. We were getting about $750 rent, so we put that on Airbnb, and it about tripled in what we were getting in rent. So from there, we purchased a small hotel in Halifax, which is just it's one of those with the outdoor entrance type of thing, not like a big Marriott or something like that. So that gave us a lot of exposure to that. And then in 2021, we bought our first larger cabin style property, which did about triple what we thought it would do. So we did another one in 22, And then this year, so in 22 we bought a log cabin, 7-bedroom, 7 acres, decent sized property. And then in 23, which was earlier this year, we bought our largest property, which is sleeps 50 people. It's really big and it's doing well as well. So yeah, that's us.
So we kind of do two different things. I manage short-term rentals for people. Mike does long-term. So we kind of each have our own thing. I will just tell you how I got started with short-term rentals, Airbnb, and then I'll let him tell you a little bit more about how we got started investing in real estate. So we were familiar with Airbnb because we had stayed at one in Napa Valley. This was 2018, so before Airbnb was really popular in this area especially. And Mike came home from work one night and he said, I think we should list our personal home on Airbnb. And I was not super enthused. I liked our house. I really liked living there. But eventually he convinced me and we decided to move for the summer only to a 1-bedroom apartment on my parents' property above their carriage house. And it was not like a garage carriage house, this was an animal barn carriage house. So I woke up the first morning because there was a ruckus down below because the animals were still in the barn from the winter and they decided they were kicking, obviously, and I am not being dramatic. I'm being a little bit dramatic. My eyes were burning because of the smell of manure coming up from the floorboards, and I was like, we are insane. So a few things happened, though. We genuinely had the most magical summer on our parents' property. It was really fun to be able to live there with our oldest, our daughter, on the property where I grew up. And then secondly, we decided really quickly, I decided really quickly, Mike had already decided this, that we didn't want to move back to our house in Intercourse, and so we started looking for a new place to live, and our house was doing well on Airbnb, so it worked out. And then third, my father-in-law had an apartment also in Intercourse that was vacant, and he said, hey, what if I put this on Airbnb? And I was like, well, I'll do it for you. I was doing it anyway. And it did really well for him. He went to church and Pinecraft and told all his friends, and that's how I got my first clients. So most days I cannot believe what this has grown into for us. It's grown really organically, just really word of mouth, and I'm just so grateful to be able to do what I do and to be in this space. And yeah, that's it.
All right, thanks, Jake. So first off, I was in construction for about 20 years. We got, I guess our first real estate experience would have been around 2017. We bought a single-family row home on the west side of Lancaster City. Purchased it, needed a lot of work, about 15 grand into it, and talked to the realtor, and he's like, if you sell this thing, you probably make about between 5 and 10 grand. And I'm like, let's do it. Like, I was all in. Anyway, we did end up selling it. We put 7 grand in our pocket. Looking back now, should probably kept it, but either way, it stoked us for real estate. I got the bug, and I would say about 2 years later, we started adding single and multifamilies to our portfolio. And through that, our last multi that we purchased, I got to know Kurt, which was the seller of this multi-unit, really well. We met at closing, and we instantly hit it off. We were chatting back and forth, and it was literally the loudest closing I've ever been at. Like, typically closings are a little more quiet, people are reserved, they're just signing papers. This was a party. I mean, we were having a great time. He was ecstatic to get rid of a problem property. I was ecstatic to buy a property at a good price. So that was a win for everybody. Long story short, during the conversation, he mentioned that he has a portfolio of multi-units and that he's been doing it for 30 years and he's thinking of getting out of it in the near future. So, of course, I got his number and I text him about every month just to make sure he knows I'm still here. And lo and behold, earlier this spring, I think it was, he texted me one morning and said, hey, I'm ready to sell everything. Do you guys want to buy? So we worked out a deal. He did under financing for me, and we closed on the properties about 5 months ago. So we have been self-managing that deal there. We decided we're going to self-manage to try it out, and so far it's been going really well. And then currently what I'm doing, like Jake mentioned, I'm doing real estate full-time as an agent. I got my license last winter and started doing that full-time this spring. And I'm having a great time with it. So.
That's awesome. It's actually early this spring that you and I connected on our trip out west.
Yes.
I've known Mike for, I don't know, quite a few years. I've known you for a long time, but Mike and I, along with one other friend, flew out to the Grand Canyon in Arizona back in April to run the Grand Canyon, and we had a lot of fun on that trip, and probably been connecting more since that.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, well, I was just going to mention, so Dave explained it very well what we do, but I just wanted to add that, so our very first one, the garage apartment, he worked with me for, I don't know, close to a year to get it on Airbnb. He wanted to list it, and I was like, no way. It's my kitchen window looks directly up to the porch. And I was like, no, that's invading my privacy. But, so just want to encourage anybody, if you have that thought of possibly doing it, but think, too tight to your space. Obviously, it's a personal preference, but it's been really good. It's actually turned into a blessing. Like, we've met so many awesome people and relationships. It's been great, really fun. So.
I'll have to comment on that because I'm trying to list the pool as part of the rental too. And I've been working on it for over a year on that one, and I haven't gotten there yet, so. That'd be a lot of expenses that would become an expense.
Yeah, it's all about the taxes, but that's directly out my kitchen window.
Very good. Something I was going to do earlier and I forgot, but I would love to know kind of who we have in the room. So how many of you are owners or part owners of a short-term rental currently or in the past? Any exposure to owning a short-term rental? Nice. And now how many of you are also the primary host for that property? So quite a few less, but a lot of Airbnb short-term rental owners in here. Very good. Okay, Kayla is going to kick us off with a little bit of information on overall market, industry currently. I'm not sure exactly what she has prepared, but Kayla, you can go for it.
Well, to be fair, you took half my speech in your intro. So I was going to ask how many people do Airbnb, what you just did. And I also had just kind of some fun facts how Airbnb got started. So Jake already
Just pretend I didn't say that.
Well, we'll do 3 minutes instead of 4 minutes and 45 seconds. All right. So I think the biggest question that I've been getting, and I think probably Dave and Jake as well, is what does the Airbnb industry look like moving forward? So we'll definitely try to dive into that a little bit more later on, but you've probably heard people use terms like Airbnb bust, or you've heard people say that the market is flooded. And so to start, I just want to give you some big picture statistics to show how big the industry really is. So it started in San Francisco in 2007, very new industry, so it's about 15 years old. And 2 guys in San Francisco decided to rent their mattress to help pay for rent. And it has grown exponentially. There are currently more than 150 million users worldwide that have booked over 1 billion stays. 6 guests check into an Airbnb listing every single second. That is wild. There are currently over 4 million Airbnb hosts worldwide and 6 million active listings. So on average, hosts manage or own more than 1 listing. It takes users an average of 11 minutes and 31 seconds when booking a stay on Airbnb. So that really speaks to how user-friendly the Airbnb app is. It was probably 10 years or less when if you wanted to go on vacation, you called up the travel agent, told them what you were looking for, and then you just cross your fingers and hope that the house was decent when you got there. So definitely improvement there. This is interesting to me. 36% of guests are between the ages of 25 and 34, and 13% are aged 55 and older. So I think just based on the fact that the younger generation is going to get older and continue to use Airbnb, the number of users in Airbnb is definitely going to continue to grow. Completely random information that I just thought was really interesting, and I suspect this was actually from 2022, and the numbers are already higher, but there are currently 240,000 cabins listed on Airbnb. I think this is in the US alone, maybe worldwide. 240,000 and 60,000 tiny homes. So just a little bit of friendly competition in that area. It is estimated that Airbnb now occupies a 20% market share of the vacation rental industry. So I think if I was understanding that correctly, that would include the hotel space, which is really fascinating to me how much that has grown. And then just a few quick numbers for those of you who are interested in the numbers, the revenue of Airbnb. Quarterly, this is looking at Q2. Typically, Q3 is the highest earning quarter for Airbnb, but they did not have the 2023 Q3 stats. So just so we can compare over the years, we'll start in 2019. Q2 of 2019 was $1.2 billion in quarterly revenue. And then 2020, it dropped down to $335 million. Obviously, that was the worst quarter because of COVID. And it goes without saying, I'm assuming most people know this, but Lancaster County, or this area, even Pennsylvania as a whole, did not get hit as hard as Airbnb globally did, because this was kind of a safe space from cities. But then by 2021, that number bounced back dramatically, and that was 1.3 billion, so already more than 2019. And then 2022 was a really, really great year for Airbnb. There was almost a 60% increase when you look at Q2 in 2022, and that was 2.1 billion. And then from 2022 to 2023, it jumped 18% to 2.5 billion. So it's hard to tell exactly what those numbers mean, because obviously the number of listings has increased as well, and I could not find somewhere where it had the two side by side, but it just kind of shows you how much the industry has grown. And then finally, Jake touched on this a little bit, but I found several different reports. It's hard to say exactly, but Airbnb's evaluation as a whole is currently somewhere between $75 and $113 billion. So I think it's safe to say that the industry isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And the 6 guests checking in every second on average, I couldn't help but do a little bit of math on that. So based on that, which of course weekends it's higher or whatever, but based on that average, in the time that we're sitting here tonight, there'll be about 30,000 guests checking into an Airbnb somewhere in the world. So it shouldn't be a big surprise that, I don't think you mentioned this, but Airbnb has about 6,800 employees, and they are not out there cleaning your property and cleaning your hot tub, or at least they're not doing that in mind. They are taking care of issues and building, I don't know what they're all doing, but they do it really well. Anyway, we are going to dive in with the first specific question, probably the broadest question of the evening. I don't know where this will go, but it's kind of like the obvious thing. Is Airbnb still a good deal? Can I still make money on it? A lot of us have seen locally where the supply has seemed to outpace the demand. Some people aren't making as much money as they thought they would, or as they were told that they could. So the question for you guys, in no particular order, is it still a good idea? What are you seeing? You might as well kick us off, Dave.
I can give you a live example of the mansion property that we bought. Is almost completely booked for the summer, which is a sign that your price isn't high enough. 2024, yeah. So we raised the price and then it would get booked again, we'd raise the price some more. And so I'm not sure if that's an indication of a large property, because our other properties are not getting booked quite that much, not nearly that much. However, it is a sign that the bookings are strong, and you know it's not cheap. So the demand is out there for that. So yeah, obviously I'm going to say that it's still strong and it's still a way to go. You just have to have the right expectations. Like it really depends on what you're expecting. If you're expecting practical expectations, then probably it's the way to go. And it really depends on what you want. If you have a cabin that you have as a pleasure property, and why not turn it into a business? And that's a lot different want or expectation than if you're buying a property that's 50 acres and a real nice house on it, and you're hoping to cash flow $5,000 or $10,000 a month. That might be an unrealistic expectation, depending on the condition of the house or the size or all that kind of stuff. So it is a very broad question, but if done right, it's the way to go.
I don't have a lot to add to that, but yeah, just if you're thinking, I want to go buy a property and put it on Airbnb, great, but yeah, like Dave said, it's depending what you want, and you got to be wise with, like, does it cash flow? If cash flow is what you're after, you got to do your numbers right, and not pay too much for the property, not be too desperate for it. But yes, it definitely is still a strong industry for sure.
I think what I have found this year is there is a larger gap between the properties that are performing really well and the ones that are doing okay. So what's interesting is Airbnb started mainly as in the very beginning it was a mattress on a floor, but it started as a room rental service. So you could rent out a room in your home, and that was what primarily was listed on Airbnb, was kind of like a part of a house. And then that has drastically changed. I think COVID probably played a part in that, but now it's primarily entire home listings. And so when we first listed our house in 2019, obviously supply and demand has something to do with that, but the expectations and the standards for an Airbnb were much lower than what they are now. And now there's so many options for people to choose from. So a property that performed well without even trying might not be performing as well. It's probably still doing better than having it as a long-term, but it takes a little bit more work. You have to work for the money a little bit more. We'll get into this with another question, but I've also noticed, so a lot of people will tell you unique stays perform well, and that is true. They will tell you that a lot of amenities perform well on Airbnb, and that is true. I think one part that people aren't talking about is the aesthetic of your listing. So what the interior design looks like, what your space looks like inside. Honestly, almost affects a listing when you look at the numbers more than even the location of a listing. The listings are almost becoming a destination in and of themselves. So, very broad question. It can be a yes or a no, but I think things are definitely shifting, and you just want to make your listing as good as it possibly can be, and then it will probably perform well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to add to that. I think the one thing that comes to my mind is if you're just getting started and you want to get into real estate, I think Airbnb right now is a harder industry to get into because of the capital that it takes to perform well. I think you guys are a prime example of that. You guys have some really nice properties, but for somebody who's starting out to purchase something like that is really, really difficult. And then to furnish it and all that. So, yeah, that's basically what I have to add.
We were chatting before the meeting a little bit. Somebody had a question about long-term versus short-term. And I think it's a question that comes up quite a bit, and it's a good question. It can be a little bit hard to answer that specifically, but why don't we have you weigh in on that a little bit. Mike, you can start. Like if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to buy an investment property, what do you think I should do? A short-term rental or a long-term rental?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, and I usually follow I've already had questions of, well, first of all, what cash do you have available? Do you have long-term? Do you have any rentals? And what are your intentions, or what are you looking to do with the property? If you're looking to buy a cabin to use with your family, but you want a little bit of additional income, that might be a great setup. If you're looking just to get into the real estate game, I say just get into it with a lower dollar long-term rental. And if you're whether you're a business or you have a cash problem with a business and you want to get in, you want to have you want to try to offset some taxes, Airbnb is active income. That's a great strategy for that. So there's a lot of variables, and I probably can't give a definite yes or no, here's what you need to do. But yeah, that's what I have on it.
Other thoughts on that?
We're a little bit of a juxtaposition because I manage Airbnbs for people, but we only own one Airbnb ourselves, and everything else that we own is long-term in our portfolio, so we're kind of in the middle.
Should that tell us something?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you just have to decide what you want to do. Yeah.
I think Mike answered it real well. It's a lot, to me, it seems like a lot less risk to do long term. You pretty well know within $50 or $100 what your rent's going to be. With short term, you're like, okay, am I going to get $100 or $300? Am I going to rent 20 nights or 30 nights? And it can vary from, you know, 100,000 to 150,000, and that can be all of your net right there. So it's, to me, unless it's a really good deal, it seems like a lot more risk. And so if, you know, if you're okay with risk, you might be more okay with Airbnb. If you're not, you might want to try something on short term first or on long term first.
Sure. I think Mike made a really good point about the tax advantages of a short-term rental. Because there's been times where I'm talking to someone or I'm hearing the numbers of a short-term rental, and I hear what they paid for it, and I hear what the nightly rates are, and you're kind of like, how, like, is that really good? And then you realize it saved them like a massive amount of taxes in year one. And that still doesn't mean you want to get yourself into a property that's not performing well just to save a little bit on taxes. But there's all these different variables that have different values to different people. And it took me a long time to kind of understand that. I always thought something's either a good deal or it's not a good deal. And all I knew is I want a good deal. But it's not. Different people have different values on the different things that it can bring. Let's talk a little bit about self-managing versus managing your own. So obviously, Kayla, you just said that you mostly manage for other people. But yeah, I'm sure you all have a perspective on that. David and Rachel, you started managing for other people fairly recently, and you've managed your own, and you've done it very well for a couple of years. So what would you say to someone that has made a decision or they've already bought one and they're asking, should I manage it myself or should I hire a manager? Okay, go for it.
Well, I used to say you should always manage your own because I thought that nobody else is going to take care of your property and your guests as well as you are. Until I realized that some people don't get excited about hosting other people and some people don't get excited about property management. So then I realized that I'm probably better at taking care of your guests and your property than you are. So it really depends also on, like, if you have an apartment above your garage, you know, you can easily manage that yourself and you can probably do the best job anyone can. If you're a business owner and you're making a lot of money and you want a property that you can use for pleasure but also have it listed, if you don't have the time to answer to your guests, to take care of the property, to manage your cleaners and all that, then you're probably not the best person to do it. So yeah, it really depends on your situation.
I think you said it very well. Yeah, if you want to be hands-off, you have cash to put into your property, but you want to be hands-off, by all means, having a manager can be huge. And especially, you know, even creating something unique on your property, sometimes a second set of eyes on something can be very helpful as well, with interior designing or whatever that may be. So, but yeah, like he said, if it's just a small one on your property, you're probably the best one to do it. So it's really up to, yeah, depending on what you want.
Yeah, I think this is another one of those questions that I would always follow up with a question in return. So, do you always have access to your phone or iPad? You know, are you available for guest messages? Maybe do you have a wife or kids, or even you yourself who would enjoy doing like maintenance and cleaning type thing? You know, a lot of people have older kids, and if the property is near to where they live, they're looking for, like, you know, the lawn mowing, their kids can do it, the cleaning, their kids can do it, and then that's a totally different situation than someone who's looking to be hands-off. The other thing to keep in mind is when you have a manager, you are paying anywhere from 10 to 25% in management fees, and that's typically off of the gross nightly rate or the gross income. So just when you're running numbers, you have to decide what that's worth to you, and then also what your time is worth to you. So.
Yeah, I think you guys answered it well. I think the biggest question is, what's your time worth to you? I think that's the biggest thing I would have to add to that.
And I think,
I was just going to mention, I know messaging your guests right away can be very big. So you get an inquiry, you want to respond right away. So like Kayla said, if you have a cell phone on you all the time, you might be fine. If not, that's a pretty big deal. Because a lot of people, they send maybe 4 or 5 inquiries out at one time. First one to respond might get the booking. So pretty big deal to respond in a timely manner. So that could be.
yeah. And I think it does really depend a lot on what you really like doing. You know, I have seen some people that are very reluctant to give up that 10, 20% or whatever, and what they don't realize is they could probably actually get that much more revenue for their booking if they had a professional manager. But then there's a lot of reasons why you might or might not. So I think just understanding the options is really good. Something that ties into some of what we've been talking about is cost of furnishing a space. So there's a lot of different, people have different ideas on that. Some people say you can furnish, you know, there's a very broad range in what people spend on furnishing a space. So, Rachel, why don't you start with this one so Dave doesn't say everything that you were going to say. But so you have furnished a lot of your own spaces, and you're now getting involved with doing that for other people. So,
Yeah.
what does it take to furnish a space well?
Yeah, well, I don't mind shopping. I love shopping. I love spending money, especially other people's. So like he said, I don't know what it costs. I just spend the money. I don't keep track.
I can answer that.
So Dave and I actually make a really good team in this because he hates shopping and I love it. So, but he loves numbers and I don't necessarily care for that. So he does all the bookwork. He keeps track of all the numbers. Somebody would come to us, hey, what would you think it would cost to furnish this house? Well, typically what we do is I have this list that I go through. I would do a complete walk through the house and make a list of what I would add to the property. And by now we have a good idea what it would cost for, you know, sofa and whatnot. And then I would print it out on a detailed list for you and come up with a fairly close quote. But yeah, as far as, I don't really have a percentage to go off of. And yeah, honestly, they would maybe know the numbers better. But yeah, I don't mind filling the house, but
Yeah,
so you keep
we'll
track
get
of
the
it.
numbers from Dave.
Yeah.
You'll spend a lot on a big cabin, so obviously that depends on the size of the property. So, I mean, if you have a 6-7 bedroom cabin, if you're going to do it right, you're going to probably spend about $80,000. If you have something a little bigger where you can put some extra bunk beds and a couple extra sofa areas, you'll probably spend $100, and that's a down payment on the property. So that's why Mike said it's a big deal. It takes a lot of capital to do that. You might be able to go out and buy some used stuff and, you know, do it for less. You'll probably pay for that in the long run.
So to kind of tie in with that, when he says you'll pay for it in the long run, when someone asks how much it costs to list a property, that is a very difficult question to answer because you can list a property, the exact same property, 2 very different ways. So I've been suspicious of this for a while. It's kind of what I said about the aesthetics play a role in how much you make. And this is not to say that this is the only way to do it or even the way that you should do it. This is just what I found when I was kind of prepping some statistics for tonight. So there was a property a few years ago that we hired a professional designer, and she did a very luxury boutique stay. And the property performed incredible, like way better than I could have ever imagined. The thing was, it was a Longhorn farm in Elverston, and so the setting was idyllic. And so it was very hard to tell if it was the setting or if it was the furnishings. So last year, kind of a full circle moment for me. My mom and dad decided to list their apartment above the carriage house. There are no longer animals. There have not been for a while. But they completely redid it. They hired the same designer. She did a fantastic job. And they spent about $30,000 for a one-bedroom apartment. So this is a very, very beautiful stay. And at the exact same time, I listed another carriage house that had a similar setting. That one, so my parents' property was a one-bedroom, or is a one-bedroom. The other one was a two-bedroom, sleeps 6. And the owners did a fantastic job. The listing looks great, but it's not like a designer stay. And when you look at the numbers for a year, the one-bedroom outperformed the two-bedroom by 30%. So it paid for the furnishings very quickly. Does that answer the question?
That's good. That's good.
So if anyone wants to do like a luxury boutique stay, let me know. That's my plug.
Another thing I wanted to add to that, you might think, well, I'll save by going to used furniture stores, going to the thrift stores to get secondhand. And that might be okay, that might work for you, but like Kayla said, it's very important to have it looking attractive and also good quality. So that's another thing that a manager or a designer can bring in there. There's a lot of things that we've tried and it failed. So we lost money on it, poor quality or whatever it had been. But just my recommendation is don't go as cheap as possible. Make it look attractive and good quality.
It's got to look good in the pictures, or you're not even
Yes.
not even going to get anything, right? We're going to shift gears here shortly, but one more question on hosting and so forth. We were having some discussion before about if you are managing for other people, doing it as a co-host versus a primary host and all of that. Sounded like a few of you had some, wanted to hit that topic. So, Dave, do you want to start on that? I think you had some.
Well, I can just speak to that as a, like, we recently started managing properties, and one of the things that I was going to do better than a lot of managers was I was going to let everyone have their own Airbnb account. And I did that for a few, and it's working okay, but I'm running into challenges with tying it into my property management software. So when you're going to grow, you're going to want software to take care of all this for you. And there's issues with like payments and things like that, and they have to do workarounds. And so like going forward, everything's going to be on my account. So that's something that I just am not able to offer what I thought we would be able to. But they can still become a co-host. And still, you can still be transparent with your messaging and all that if that's what we choose to do. So, but me as a property manager is going to own the listing going forward.
So just to clarify, because it gets very confusing for some people, co-host and primary host, you can be both. So I think what you were referring to is like the listing host. So, or like the owning, the property owner. So what happened when I started listing properties for people was I had no idea that this was going to turn into a business for me. And so the thought of listing someone's property on my account and then potentially down the road not being able to do it anymore, deciding I didn't enjoy it, I just didn't want them to be in a position where then they would lose their reviews. So I started by, in the beginning, a property owner owns their listing. I make myself the co-host, I make myself the primary host, so when the guest looks at the listing, I am the host. But technically that listing is listed on the owner's Airbnb account, and they own that listing, they own the reviews. So if they were ever to go a different direction or to decide to self-manage, they have those reviews. And that was something that I am okay with. That's still how I do it. So it does raise issues if you have property management software. That is something that I have seen. I actually don't use property management software. Airbnb is pretty user-friendly, and so far I've just done it through Airbnb, and it's worked well for me. So I think we got asked that question prior to tonight. Someone had messaged that question in. And if you are listing Airbnbs for other people, you just ultimately have to decide what's the most convenient for you and how you want to do it. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way.
Good. Okay, let's talk a little bit about best tips and ideas for hospitality. How to, not only how to get the bookings, because we're talking about that, but when you have guests staying at your property, what are some things that you guys do to give the wow factor to your guests? Things that they haven't been expecting. What are some things that you think sets you apart from some other owners in that way?
Yeah, go ahead. I don't know.
Oh,
So, and Kayla, I would also love to hear a little bit. So, how often do you go to the listings that you manage?
yeah.
Not a whole lot,
Not
I'm
very
guessing.
often.
Sure.
No. So they're pretty dialed in at this point. Whenever I list a new listing, it takes a few months to get everything, all the kinks worked out. But for all of my properties, I have cleaners that are specific to that property. They're the only cleaner for that property, and they do a very good job. It's not like a cleaning service. So they kind of are like my eyes and ears for my listings. Obviously, if there's an issue, then that gets addressed. But I think, I don't know if it's worth saying, but I manage properties a little bit different than I think how Dave, you do, and how maybe some other property managers do. So I charge 10%, and then I am responsible for all of the guest communications, and I'm responsible for the cleaning service, cleaning schedule, maintenance schedule. So my homeowners are not getting messages constantly. They're really not getting messages at all. But if there is a maintenance issue, either the homeowner is the maintenance person or we have a maintenance person assigned to that property that me and the homeowner found at the beginning of when we created this listing. So I'm not running out at 10 o'clock at night if there's an issue. I'm either calling the maintenance person for that property or I'm calling like the plumbing and heating service, that sort of thing. So I think I'm probably on the properties a little bit less than what you guys would be. Yes, no.
I think I could probably answer that as an owner better than as a property manager. And that's one of the things we're trying to work through is like, okay, how do we take what we built as owners and offer that to our clients, which is now our owners that we work for. And it's one of the things that we've kind of had to work through with, like, when we own a property, it's real easy to just, do something special for a guest and incur the cost. It's not a big deal, right? And then when you do it for other people, now you have to decide, like, okay, are they going to be okay with this $50 gift to make a special stay or not? And so doing it as a property management company, we're still working through that. What we do as owners, though, is we don't limit amenities, and I'm talking like toiletries and things like that. We don't give them a starter pack. We give them enough to get, through their stay. We've actually had compliments on that. Like, they didn't run out of toilet paper and had to go buy more. They didn't need more paper towels, or like they didn't, we gave them enough of coffee for the entire 3 days. That kind of thing. Or like bath towels. There was more than one bath towel per person. We just try and, they come there and our kitchen's like really well stocked, which, Rachel takes care of that. Every tool you can think of, we try to make sure they have it. We'll do some special things like, and again, this is as an owner, like, one time we had someone do a 50th birthday celebration and we got a big balloons, with happy 50th, or maybe it was an anniversary or something like that. So we put that out by the driveway. Little special gifts like that. We try and leave some kind of a gift. Sometimes it's a bottle of wine. That's another thing we're working on. So many things are easy to think of, but then so much harder to actually do. But like a gift basket with different items, just something nice, just a personal touch of some kind. But probably more than anything is our communications. Just communicating with them, staying on top of things. If they need something, we're right there. We'll reach out to them to make sure that they're having a good stay, and we do that throughout the stay. Before they come, so before they get there, or right when they book, they get a video of me and Rachel at the property, just kind of welcoming them, thanking them for the booking. This is a pre-recorded video. And then sometime before they come, they get a video walkthrough of the kitchen. So with kitchen cupboards and drawers open, detailed video of everything that's in the kitchen. Obviously it's video, so now it's a little outdated because we added some things, so you kind of have that to work through. And then before they come, they get check-in instructions, which is also, you know, listed down as like typed up, but then also a YouTube video they can watch with just us walking to the property and showing them how to use a hot tub, different things like that. We try to get in front of them personally. Like if we can't be there in person, at least our faces can get in front of them. And then checkout, same way. We have a checkout video. There again, they get the instructions. If they don't want to watch the video, they don't have to, but they have the opportunity to. And so the checkout, you know, it's just me and her doing this interview. And we basically tell them, you know, put the towels in the laundry room or whatever. Just, it's not even as much about the instructions as it is about getting in front of them. And then when they leave, we'll check the property, and if it's good, we'll let them know that it's good and that we're pleased with them. And so, yeah, so I would say communications is probably more than the gifts and all the other stuff. Communications is probably the biggest thing.
I like what you're doing with those videos. I think that's probably a pretty rare thing. It's not a very easy thing to do, but yeah, I think that's probably sets you apart a good bit. Dave, you also mentioned a while back when we were chatting about you oftentimes, or I don't know if it's always, but sometimes before the day that a guest is checking in, you're at the property, you'll like find a reason to shoot a video telling them just something. Are you still doing that?
Yeah, I forgot about that one. So what I like to do, and I'd like to have this done every time, but you can't always do it. I'll go to the property and I'll do a simple selfie video with your iPhone. And I'll just hold it up and say, hey, this is David, welcome to Pine Hollow Lodge. Hey, the firewood's over here, extra propane tank over here. You know, hope you guys have a great weekend, you picked a nice one. And I'll text it to him. And that, like that's even more personal than your YouTube videos, but it's really hard to get that accomplished when you have, especially as a manager. It's impossible as a manager to do 20 properties. So when I say that, I'm speaking as out of an owner perspective. However, we are looking to try and implement that as a manager as well.
I think that's great. And you answered my next question. I was going to ask if you, assuming you text that, because you can't send messages on the Airbnb app, right?
Not videos.
You can't send videos. And it's not a big deal, but I probably overthink some of this stuff a little bit. Sometimes when you text someone, then they'll be replying to you there, and that's fine. It's just when not everything is in one thread, it can be harder to look back on something, find something, remember something, whatever. But I really love doing that. It's a very personalized way of, quote, greeting them, and yeah, just getting in front of them is
Just one of the things we've talked about with that, because it's pretty important for us to do that. So one of the things we've talked about is we could record a video every month so that it's fairly fresh. You wouldn't be able to say their names, but you could have that video on your phone and send it every time. It just wouldn't be quite as personal, but it would still be good.
yeah, good thought.
But the whole thing of them messaging on your personal cell phone then is kind of a problem. That happens all the time. Like we're trying to build a team right now, and so whenever I do that and they start messaging me directly, now my team has no idea this is happening. Whereas if they respond on the Airbnb message, everyone knows what's going on. So it's one of the things we're trying to work through is with building a team.
Right. On the topic of hospitality, it's something that I really enjoy, and I try to. I'm always looking for new ideas, new ways. Things like, especially this time of year, it gets dark pretty early. Things like letting lights on inside the house, outside the house. Things like even having music playing softly when they're getting there. Handwritten welcome notes, stuff like that. Do you guys pay a lot of attention to that?
We don't do, we'll have some motion lights that come on when they get on there. I don't really worry about having the outside lights on. We don't do any music. So no, I would say most of the things you mentioned there, I don't think we do hardly any of them.
I think that's easy to do if it's your personal property. But if you have 20, 30, or 5, 10 properties, you just can't run around to every property. So I think that's a great tip for people who are looking to do it for themselves, by all means.
What Kayla meant to say is how can
I don't want to.
I will say though, we have discovered it's such a big deal to the guests to receive like that video or a gift, because we heard the message they're coming for a birthday party.
Yeah,
So you send a birthday candle or something. That's such a big deal that we've talked about hiring someone specifically for that. That's their job, to go around every property just to protect it. Or like David said, to make it a little bit more scalable would be to take a video once a month and send that one. But so the lady that does help us with messaging, she's very intentional with asking, are you celebrating anything special? And if it's a birthday, well then we'll send something, some kind of birthday gift or anniversary or whatever. And getting in front of them is really big. We've dealt with some pretty messy issues that our guests had to deal with. Mouse in the house or Wi-Fi not working or some crazy stuff that we'd be like, it's pretty nasty to put up with that when you book this expensive stay. But what we've discovered is if we run through the problem, we show up at the house, we take care of the issue or do everything we can to take care of it, they will always give you a 5-star review. They love seeing your face. They just, yeah. So this man right here, I would just say he runs through the problems. He actually almost likes when something happens so that he can show up at the house. And 9 out of 10 times they're cooking amazing food and they serve us. We get some amazing, like, Italian people, they cook amazing food.
Kayla didn't know you could do that.
See, I feel that is a great way to get 5-star reviews. When I'm a guest, I don't want to see the host.
Yeah.
Like, I just want my space, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. That's amazing. But I've had a host who showed up at the house and insisted she walks me through the house when we were guests, and I just wanted to go to bed, you know.
Yeah.
And so if we have a problem, like let's say the microwave's not working.
Yeah.
I'll ask them, do you want me to come fix it?
Yeah, that's totally different.
Yeah. Speaking of reviews, let's talk about reviews. So something happens, whatever, and you get a bad review, and you don't think it's fair. It's a pretty hot topic. Obviously, I think Airbnb is constantly changing how some of this works. You can get some reviews removed, but don't think that you can just get any review removed that you don't think is fair, because it's not how it works, nor is it how it should work. But I've had a little bit of experience with that in the last half a year, and I know that you guys have as well. So let's touch on that a little bit, of how to get a review removed, and then also specifically on if a guest is complaining about something and telling you that if you don't give them a refund, they're going to leave you a bad review. That's a really important one to know there. So, Kayla, you had mentioned that you had something going on with Airbnb with trying to get a review removed. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, if you want, and just your experience in general with trying to get bad reviews removed that you don't think are fair or accurate.
Sure. So I think you mentioned a few important things. You cannot just get any bad review removed. You mentioned if they ever coerce you for like a refund, if they say I won't leave a bad review if you give me money back. That is the easiest way to have a review removed. The difficult thing with having a review removed is Airbnb customer support is fantastic. I'm not knocking them, but most times you probably know more than what the representative or the person that you're talking to does. And so you have to almost educate them. So I always will go to their website, and in my message I will say, per your website, these are your guidelines, and for that reason, this review has grounds for removal. So you mentioned the asking for a reimbursement, like kind of a threat type situation. They also just changed their policy where if a guest damages your property and then leaves a bad review, you can have that review removed. It's very difficult. I just got done doing it, and it took about 2 weeks to have it removed. But basically the guests had broken the gas stove, they broke the knobs so the gas was on continuously, and when our maintenance personnel showed up, she tested for gas, and a fireball just blew up in the kitchen. And then they left a review saying that it was like this when they arrived and made it sound like it was our fault that the fireball exploded. So first of all, I had to prove that they broke the stove because clearly the gas was not on. It had been 2 weeks since someone had been there. And once I proved that they caused the damages, then I could have the review removed. You just have to be persistent, almost annoying with Airbnb, and eventually I think they just get tired of dealing with you and they take the review down.
Have you had some other ones removed or?
Yeah, I had a situation where there was bed bugs in the listing, and the guest threatened to sue me if I didn't give him a refund, or he said he was going to sue me and leave me a bad review. And so that listing is no longer live. It is not one of my listings. You won't find it. But because he had threatened me, then I could have the review removed. So I'm trying to think. I think there's been other situations. Basically, you just have to prove your case to Airbnb, and then you can have it removed.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the best thing is to not get those reviews in the first place. But there are people that, I think a lot of people just are uneducated. So they don't realize that a 4-star review is not a good review. Yeah. And 4-star in Airbnb is a bad review. I'm sick for a day if I get a 4-star review. It's a big deal, really big deal. So I mean, I don't even want to talk about 3-star, 2-star, 1-star. 4-star is bad. So for you in the room, if you're giving a review and you give a 4-star review, that's a big deal. So Ring cameras are my best friend if it comes to a bad review. We had one recently where she said, nice listing. Sometimes they'll give good comments, but they'll just leave a bad star rating. And so she said, nice listing. So there's nothing that I can say about nice listing that I can have it removed, right? It's nothing wrong with saying that. So I checked the Ring camera and seen they had more guests than was registered. And so that review was removed right away. So that's having a Ring camera that on the parking area so that you can see that that'll pay itself off real quick. So a guest can always remove its own review as well. So we had one where they broke a gas stove, or they broke an electric stove, cook stove, and we filed a claim and we gave them a 4-star review, and they gave us a 4-star review, and we both removed our reviews. So you can do that. We've only removed, we haven't removed a lot of reviews. So it is hard to do, and it's not like we're out there every week figuring this thing out, removing reviews. Our practice is just to not get those. But like Kayla said, if they ever threaten anything at all, whether it's dollars or whether it's a bad review or whatever it is, that's the easiest one. Take a screenshot of that, give them whatever review you need to, and you're good to go.
And one thing I wanted to add, this is why it's important to always keep your communication, ideally on Airbnb message, because then the customer service person helping you can see it. But at the very least, keep it on a text message, because if you have a phone call, you can't prove it. So I would highly recommend to always keep communications with guests documented.
And tell your cleaners to take pictures as soon as there's a stain on the carpet or any minor damage. Yeah, pictures, videos, the more you have, the better. The better you can file a claim or remove a review and whatnot. Pictures and they need evidence.
Yeah, if you don't have evidence of something, you won't get anywhere at all. And that's kind of going into claims too, though, not just reviews, but if you have a damage, whether it's carpet or whatever it is, if you don't have evidence, you won't get anywhere at all. If you do have evidence, you have a very good chance of getting it, being able to file a claim and getting paid for that.
One of the biggest reasons I think it's important that we're educated on options for removing reviews is I think a lot of hosts will not address a problem or point out something because they're afraid of a bad review. I had a situation a while back where we had a group of way too many people. I think they had booked for 12 people, and there was that many vehicles there, and there was kids, and then the next morning there was another couple of vehicles, and then there was a dog. And I'm I'm not having it. I didn't tell them they have to leave, but I'm like addressing this, and they need to pay extra if they're bringing extra guests. And I knew that if they get upset and they leave a bad review, I have easy grounds for removing it. And I actually forget if they did or not. I had like 2 reviews ever that I had removed. So my point with that is, yeah, like I said, mainly so that you kind of know what your rights are. And we as hosts have certain responsibilities to other hosts for not tolerating just any behavior. Especially so in these larger properties where people might book for 10 or 12, they bring 16 or they bring 20, and you're like, well, I don't want to do anything, I don't want to get a bad review. I'm addressing that problem knowing that I should be able to get it removed if they do leave me a bad review. Yeah.
So one thing that is becoming a challenge is that guests are becoming educated with this review system, and they're taking advantage of it. And it's hurting you as the host and us as the managers. And some of them are good enough to where they're not going to threaten a bad review or anything like that. Like I had one guy tell me a story about a host who stayed at one of his properties and did this. So it is a little bit of a challenge when they know about this, and it's almost like they try and find something wrong with your property. They do everything they can to try and find something wrong, and then they'll let you know at a very convenient time, and they either want money back, and if you don't give them the money back, then you might get a bad review. Most of the time, they're just looking for some money back, which is not right.
Yep. We got a bunch of topics and questions here yet, but anything right now that kind of fresh in your mind that you want to make sure that we don't forget to talk about? If not, we'll keep right on cruising, but if there's anything kind of burning where it's like, I really want to tell this story, if not, we'll keep on going. So let's shift gears a little bit. I haven't seen any of you pulling out your phones and messaging guests while you're sitting here.
It's a slow time of year.
So actually I would love, because I think you guys have both been kind of scaling and getting some people in place, at least some of the time, to help with that. But let's talk a little bit about balancing work and family time, which I'm sure has got to be a very real thing. So Mike, you've been pretty quiet over there. You've been in the middle of this for quite a while, seeing your wife do extremely well, and also probably seeing her messaging guests at any hour of the day or night.
What are you doing here, Jake?
Great. I'm sure people have these questions about how do you balance this, because some jobs you clock out at 5 o'clock and then you're off the clock until the next morning. It's not that way with short-term rentals, and it's a challenge.
Well, that's a tough one. No, I would say, I mean, first of all, I think she handles it very well. I mean, she's very busy, but there's definitely certain times of the day where it does feel like it gets much busier. And I would say evenings, I'm careful what I say here, she's going to correct me, but I would say for the most part, I think evenings, they do slow down a little, where it hasn't been too much of an inconvenience. Like we're eating dinner or, things like that. It honestly doesn't feel to me anyway, it's been a problem. But she's obviously, her business is definitely growing, and she's getting to a point, where she is making some shifts and things like that. So, yeah.
So I think this is backtracking a little bit, so I'll do it quickly, but I don't send videos or things like that to my guests, although that is definitely the best way to do it, but I I'm very clear. So basically as a host, you just want to make sure that you're setting expectations in all regards of Airbnb. So I'm always very clear when they can expect the check-in instructions. Same way with what they can expect if there's any issues. So I always tell them, first, please always message us on Airbnb, because that way if someone else is taking care of my messages at the time, like if we're on vacation, they will still see those messages. But then I always say, if it's been 30 minutes and you haven't heard back, or if it's an emergency, here's my personal cell phone. And so then they know that they can call me if it's an issue. So I think that helps a little bit with, it's important to message guests back as quickly as possible, but you just have to be careful that your life doesn't become all consumed by your phone and by messaging guests back, because to be completely fair, a 30-minute response time to what kind of coffee maker is there in the kitchen is a very decent response time. So I'm not going to interrupt my dinner to message someone something that can wait until like 45 minutes from now.
Yeah, you're very right on that. We've learned that kind of the hard way. So at first our goal was to respond within 5 minutes every time. And still is, yeah. So Dave's the primary messenger, and well, we actually have somebody working for us as well, but I typically don't take care of the messages, so maybe I shouldn't be the one talking here, but he does really good with responding well, and I know we got some bookings because of that, like inquiries especially, you want to get back to them soon. But like Kayla said, coffee maker and whatnot, there's some really odd questions that can wait. So we have learned that some of those questions, an hour, 30 minutes, it's okay. But typically not what we shoot for. But with having 5 children in the house, sitting in the living room, families together, playing a game, whatnot, Daddy pulled his phone out, they don't know he's working, right? So we've had this conversation like, okay, we have to be careful here. Soon we'll have teenagers. And our goal is not to all be sitting in the living room on our phones, right? So if we don't want them to do that, we can't either. And yet, do they know what we're doing on our phone? Probably not. So we've had that conversation with our kids too, and they understand. But it's definitely a challenge to find that balance. But yeah, for the most part, it's good.
I think if you're monitoring the messages coming in, like if it's an emergency, always absolutely get back to your guests. But if you have a smartwatch, or even if your phone's laying there, you just check quickly what it is, then you can kind of gauge, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, and leave it if you can.
Yeah, problem is you're still then constantly, still on your mind all the time. So
Yeah.
I look forward to the day where we have a team built to where I can go away for a weekend and not have my phone on me. So we haven't figured this one out completely yet. And I'm not yet willing to, we're elite property management, right? So we're gonna give them an elite experience. And the communications is a big part of that. And so we're gonna figure out how to do it without sacrificing that experience. We just haven't figured it out yet, but we will. So we have someone on our team that really helps out a lot with that. But she also has a family, and so we're going to figure out a way where we have someone available all the time to answer the messages. And as we grow our team, it'll get easier. We'll just have to put systems and processes in place to do that. So,
Yeah. I manage 2 listings, so I probably message a good bit less than what you guys do. And I enjoy it, but it's a thing where it's like I often find myself checking my phone until the very last thing in the evening before I go to bed. I do not have my phone to where it will wake me during the night. I'm not saying you shouldn't or you should. I'm just saying I'm not available when I'm sleeping. And then what I dislike the most is I tend to look at my phone the first thing when I get up. And I don't like that. And I don't think I would have to do it. It's just kind of something that I have gotten used to doing because I like to be on it if there's something. So it's something that I'm trying to figure out as well. And you do want to be responsive, but at the same time, most of the inquiries are not urgent. But when there is something, it's really nice if you can be right there. Probably just as important along those lines is, if you're ever getting a message from a guest saying hey, we're here at the property and we can't get in for some reason, or if something's not working right, those issues have to be taken care of. That cannot be tolerated. You have to do everything in your power to prevent those problems from happening.
yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about listing on different platforms. Obviously, we're talking mostly about Airbnb. Actually, interesting point, Dave. You had that Facebook Live video yesterday where you were talking about how we start calling this Airbnb because it has become the term for short-term rentals. And I find myself trying to not use it because I know it's not the correct term, but then I think I need to use it so people know what I mean. And it's this interesting thing. Real quick side note on that. It's not the only industry where that happens. I'm curious how many of you know that Weed Eater is not a tool, it's a brand name. Weed Eater is a string trimmer. A Kleenex is a brand of facial tissue. You had no idea, did you? The other one is a petty bag. I'm not even sure what those are called, but a petty bag is a brand. What is the actual equipment? Somebody knows.
Rough terrain forklift.
Rough terrain. So it's interesting. But to your point yesterday, Airbnb has done it that well that we call them Airbnbs. So anyway, other than Airbnb, what platform do you or would you recommend listing on, and what's your thoughts on direct bookings?
So since we're talking about marketing first, that's how important marketing is on your listing. Like, that's the only thing they're buying from, the reviews, your description, and mostly your pictures. So when you're thinking of furnishing your house, it's really important that it's marketing. You can have the best thing in the world, the best product in the world, if no one knows about it, they're not going to buy it. So marketing is super important. What was the question now?
Do you list on other
yeah.
platforms? And your input on direct bookings?
Yeah, so we're primarily on Airbnb and VRBO. We do now have our own website, so you can do direct bookings. And so VRBO, we've typically, so we were just talking about this before we started, I would have my price on VRBO quite a bit higher. I would hope not to get too many bookings on there because it's a clumsy website and we weren't getting many bookings. However, in the last year and a half, the amount of bookings that we've gotten on VRBO has increased quite a bit, and now I would not want to do without. That's on the bigger properties and the smaller ones for us. Like, that's been our experience. So I would definitely be on both, and like, you just have to you'll get used to the system more and more, and we still have our price, I think 5% higher if you book on Vrbo, but they charge less, and so the guest gets about the same price. Direct bookings are a little bit more of a challenge, mostly because of insurance. Airbnb and VRBO have really good liability and damage protections. We had a damage just this week that we put in with Vrbo, and fairly painless process. You have to have your evidence, show them the proposal to fix it or whatever, and usually gets paid. Direct bookings, I'm sure there's options out there, and as property managers, we're going to be checking into that now. But that's really my biggest concern with direct bookings is property damage.
I don't have a whole lot to add to that. In my experience, VRBO always did really well for larger properties. So I think if you have like a cabin style property, something over 5 bedrooms maybe, definitely I would recommend having it on both. And even for smaller properties if you want. I have no trouble filling any of my calendars for any of my listings with primarily Airbnb. That's not to say that, so some of my smaller properties we use just Airbnb, we don't have them on both. That's not to say that we wouldn't get bookings through VRBO if we had it on both, but like, if my occupancy is high with just Airbnb, then for me it's easier for those small properties to just do that.
I have found, with limited exposure, I've found the Vrbo listings to take a lot longer to get momentum. Airbnb is really good at boosting your listing when you have a new listing. They're really good at that. I've found the Vrbo listings to take a long time to get traction, but once you get it going, I wouldn't want to do without it on large properties. I much prefer the Airbnb platform. As a whole, I like Vrbo guests. I think they can be better guests. It's oftentimes an older group, I think, families stuff. Not saying it's that way all the time, but I think I've seen a little bit of a pattern with that.
Some people might also be curious with like Booking.com or Expedia or all those. We have one property so Expedia owns probably a couple hundred different like websites. So if you're on Expedia, you're on Hotels.com and all those. We had one 2-bedroom property that did pretty well with Booking.com. Booking.com is like worldwide is one of the biggest website out there for or one of the biggest platforms for short-term rentals. More in the hotel industry, but they still do quite a bit in the small stuff. So if you have something small that's like overnight kind of hotel stays, that type of stuff, that might actually do pretty well. Now you think Vrbo's bad, Booking.com is like really bad, but they do bring in some money.
I've never used Booking.com. Let's talk a little bit about regulations. There's more and more areas that are not allowing short-term rentals. Airbnbs are allowed everywhere, right? Some places you just have to do a 30-night minimum. That's a fact. So when someone says they don't allow Airbnbs, you know what they mean, but in your mind you can correct them to saying they don't allow short-term rentals. So more and more areas are not allowing short-term rentals. Mike, have you seen that? You probably look for do you represent clients looking for short-term rentals, trying to find a short-term rental, researching? Do you call the municipality? What have you seen in that lately?
Yeah, I mean, I would say what I've seen is there's definitely fear, and like the townships are definitely starting to put procedures in place. And just because the township doesn't have restrictions doesn't mean they don't allow, but it doesn't mean they allow it. So it's very complicated. But yeah, I've definitely called townships for clients and be like, hey, what do you guys, where are you guys at? And the feedback I've gotten recently would be, we don't have anything now, but if you want to do it, we would highly recommend you get on board, because there's definitely things coming down. Now that's different townships have different procedures in place, but I do see in the near future that every township, and near future can be, I don't know how long that's going to be, but every township is going to have their guidelines.
Every township in this area has got.
Yeah, most every township in this area does have guidelines. And yeah, I had recently talked to a township, and I called them regarding a property, and I'm like, so do you guys allow short-term rentals? She's like, absolutely not. She's like, in February we are holding a meeting and we're trying to change that, but we don't know what that looks like. So that's the first one that I've gotten that doesn't. They're looking to change it. Most of them are they don't have it, or they have some restrictions. It's a little blurry. So that's what I've found.
Yeah. Have you gotten some shutdown, Kayla? Have you had experience with anything that you think is worth sharing?
So I have had at least one or two properties where there were no restrictions in place, and then the township put restrictions in place and they shut the Airbnb down. And both of those, it was at least two, but the two I'm thinking of, both of those owners hired a lawyer, pled their case. The one won and the other one did not, and was like $10,000 down the drain trying to fight to allow it, and they said no. So if someone calls me as a potential client, my number one question is always, do you have a permit for Airbnb? And if they have not already purchased the property, or if they have not already furnished the property, I always highly recommend to get that permit. If the township does not have regulations in place, at the very least, I would recommend having an email or written correspondence from them stating that, because then if they do put regulations in place, you can say, hey, I asked you and you didn't have regulations, and you can kind of hopefully plead your case a little bit better.
Why the regulations? Why are they regulating?
So,
That's a whole long topic. I actually,
30 seconds.
I'm
Why are they
actually,
regulating?
yeah, I think there's very good reasons for not allowing a short-term rental, depending on where you live, depending on what type of short-term rental it is. They can be very disruptive in a neighborhood. Now, bad neighbors that live there all the time could be disruptive as well. So there's always this argument. I followed it pretty closely when Lancaster City put regulations in place about a year ago. I didn't attend any of their hearings, whatever, but I watched them online, and it was fascinating seeing person after person step up to the microphone, plead their case, why they think they should be allowed or why they shouldn't be allowed. And there is an argument for both sides. And I actually think it's better in an area if there are regulations. Yeah. It's like certain areas they're allowed, everybody knows they're allowed. If you don't want to live there, you don't have to. So I think it's overall a good thing. Some of it is probably overreach, but all in all, I don't think it's a bad thing.
I've worked with a township recently where they allow it. You have to have a yearly inspection and pay a yearly permit fee of, I think it's $800. And I think that's the best situation that I've heard. So if anybody knows township officials and they are looking to implement laws for short-term rentals, I think something like that is a great option because it keeps the short-term rentals regulated.
Yeah.
Also brings in extra income for the township, so it's a win-win.
Yeah. So I know where you guys are at, there's less regulations in the hills of Juniata and Perry County. Have you even really run into it at all?
We haven't, and like Perry County doesn't even have a county tax. So the least they could do is start charging a county hotel tax, which most counties do. But no, we have had no issues at all.
Yeah, good. Let's talk a little bit about growing teams, because I know especially you guys are in the midst of what I would call a pretty serious growth phase, hiring some people to do some maintenance, to do some messaging and stuff. So talk a little bit about scaling a business.
Well, hats off to anyone that built a business and has a team. It's just a whole other level from doing your own thing. And so yeah, so that's what our current focus is bringing people on board that can share the vision, that can have the passion you do, and basically try and bring that culture in, and then obviously pay them well and all that. So where do you even start? So that's kind of where we're at. Where do you even start? So we started by had kind of a random meetup with a player type of person that is helping us a lot with structure, like even as far as just like your core values. What do you really want? Where do you want to go? All that kind of stuff. And are now to the point where we're ready to like hire maybe virtual assistants or maybe even in-person people. We're looking at, I guess I can say this, we're talking with someone about possibly having like cleaning employees, maintenance people on payroll, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's probably the biggest challenge is when something doesn't, like someone else can be handling the messages or helping you with the maintenance or all that kind of stuff, and it's often great as long as it works for them. As soon as it doesn't work for them, then it's back to you. Sunday afternoon and something breaks, Amos knows all about those, right? Like when it doesn't work for anybody else, it still comes back to you. And so that's probably kind of where we're at right now, is like, okay, how do we build a team that can help with those things and can really take responsibility for a lot of that stuff, and then obviously they need to be paid for that. And so we definitely haven't figured it out, but we're going to, and we're gonna have fun doing it.
What's your perspective on that, Rachel? Is it hard to let go of stuff, or is it fun when you can get somebody else to do some of your stuff, or both?
Both, I was going to say, yeah. So Dave and I both don't mind going out to the properties, meeting the guests, like I mentioned earlier. But like you said, if there's a time where something bad happens and nobody else is available, Sunday afternoon, I had to miss our son's ball game one time to go clean up somebody's vomit. Nobody else wanted to do that, right? So there's some nasty things about it, of course, but building a team and having a team of people around you to help serve with excellence is very essential, because the whole reason we started with this managing for other people was we wanted to continue serving all of our guests with excellence, all of our properties, and yet it was becoming almost too much for us alone. So we figured, okay, we'll hire a guy to help with my maintenance and stuff, and yet we didn't have enough to give him work full time. So all right, we'll take on some other properties. But now it's to the point where we don't have any more time than we did originally. So we see we're going to need a team, a legit team. So it's been a huge help to have Taryn on board. She helps a lot with messaging, and so definitely looking to build that even more. But it's just very good to have a good team of people, and like Dave said, people who are willing to go out and do the junky work as well. And yeah, it's part of managing, I guess. Yeah, to do the junky work. So, but a team is very, very essential.
So I think because of the way that I do it, it's been a little bit easier for me to scale without a team, but it's definitely becoming a pain point. So when Mike quit his job, I was hoping to wrangle him into a maintenance position, but he's too busy buying and selling houses to do that for me. So that's definitely something that we've talked about. Probably where it gets a little sticky then is the rates for management definitely reflect that. So then if I had homeowners interested in that service, the percentage that I charge would have to reflect that because you have more overhead, you have people that you're paying. So that's why I've always been able to keep my rates really low and scale. But then when we go on vacation, things like that, it becomes a little bit of a pain point. So we're working through that. We just hired our first employee. And so maybe ask me in a year from now.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, that definitely depends on what you provide as a manager, like
Yeah.
how much you
Yeah.
manage, whether you need a team or not.
Yeah. For you guys, even like Mike, for your portfolio that you bought in the city and stuff, are you taking the calls for all of that stuff? Have you started building a team around any of that or not yet?
So, I mean, that's fairly new to us. So I would say at this point, I would be boots on the ground, basically, answer messages. We have software for that. The tenants will message through the software. So she would be the back end, like more the paperwork side of things. And then also messaging the tenants. But at this point, that's where hiring somebody could possibly, we could, Airbnb, we don't have work or it gets slow. They could jump in on the backside of the long-term, like the rentals, and they could help with that. So that's what we're trying to figure out, where they would spend the most time, to basically give her a little more, she needs more time, is what it comes down to. So that's what we're trying to figure out.
Yeah,
So,
that's good.
yeah.
Well, we are getting, running out of time, exactly like I thought we would. But I'd like to hear a little bit from each of you yet on, not sure how to frame the question, but so we can sit up here all night talking about building teams, building portfolios, increasing cash flow. That stuff is fun. But what really drives you to do what you do, and when is it enough?
I think it depends on your definition of enough.
I left it pretty open-ended.
Yeah. So I think for me personally, and Mike might have a different perspective of this, but I feel so fortunate that this kind of fell in my lap. And so my goal is really just to be the best steward of what God has blessed us with,
Yeah.
and to have the biggest impact for his kingdom. And so that looks different for everyone. For some people that is, here, some people that's in a different area across seas, but just for us, I think it's just stewarding what he gave us.
So I would add to that too. I think when you stop enjoying what you're doing, you're no longer impacting people. So to me, it's very important that if I wake up and I am like, man, this day I get up, I'm so excited for my day. I feel like I impact people I feel like I do, I'm like not, but I'm definitely much more apt to talk to somebody and hear people out and just listen to people. So I think enough is enough when I stop enjoying what I'm doing, honestly.
Yeah, I think, so right now I'm reading a book called Gap in the Gain. I think a bunch of you have probably read it. And it's about you buy one house, then you have 3 houses, then you have 5 houses, and you're always reaching for that next thing. And you're like, and you get 10 houses and maybe it's a dollar amount, maybe it's 2 million or 3 million or whatever. And when do you stop, right? I think that's kind of what the question is, when do you stop? And to me, you don't stop. But it's not like you're trying to reach something, like you're there, right? So you're already there, wherever you're at. And so it's not about trying to be like that person or that person. But like Mike said, you're excited every day for it. So if you can find what excites you, then just do a lot of it and impact people along the way. And making a huge impact might not be, like maybe making a huge impact as far as like thousands of people might not be your thing. Maybe it's making a small impact on 2 people or a big impact on 2 people or 5 people. So I think just being the best version of you every day, and you know, obviously it's not something that we've all figured out completely, but which is why I'm reading the book and trying to figure that out. But I think my biggest challenge is probably just like enjoying the process all the time. And yet I'm not excited if I'm not out there, you know, doing something and being busy and reaching for more. But it's not like I'm discontent. It's not like I'm unhappy because I'm not, you know, Donald Trump or something like that. It's because that's what we do. That's what we get excited about. Like, you know, analyzing deals or whatever, talking to guests, whatever it might be. It's what you get excited about. So why not do more of it? So yeah, enjoy the moment.
I just agree with what all of you said. Yeah, live in the moment and focus on the gain and not the gap is what the book is about. Like remembering what brought you this far and enjoy it. Like, yeah, just focusing on how far you've come and treasuring that instead of always focusing on what you don't have yet but you're reaching for. So, yeah.
I think one more thing that I wanted to add to that is, I genuinely mean this. If there's people in the room who are listing Airbnbs themselves and just need help or have questions, I would be more than happy to answer your questions. Like, reach out to me. I was in an industry, so I was in the photography industry for years, and in the beginning it was very competitive based. And I'm just determined that this industry doesn't need to be that way. I think we can do community over competition. And so I guess you'll probably share our contact information, but I would be more than happy to answer questions if people have specific questions.
Yeah, great. That's great. I echo that. I had a guy reach out to me recently that seemed like he was afraid to ask me questions, and I'm like, that's not the way we are. Like you can ask any question you want. Also had experience recently where there was a property that we started managing that had been with a different manager, and that's going to happen. Like it happens. And this guy was so nice that the next client that he manages for came to me, and I kind of pushed him back and like, you know what, you got a really good manager, and he ended up staying with it. So like, and I talked to this guy then, and he said, you know, he doesn't look at me as a thorn in his saddle, but rather as a partner in the industry, and that's very much the way we feel about it. Like, we're not just after every dollar or anything like that. A relationship to us is like a lot more important than the next $100. So echo what she said there about like we're kind of an open book. Like, we don't mind sharing. I even thought about doing courses on how to self-manage, even while I'm a manager. Like, here's how you self-manage. If you're passionate about it, you know, self-manage. Do it yourself. So
Yeah, that's really good. One more question, then we're going to have to wrap it up. I was hoping to take some questions from you guys, but we're going to run out of time. I know you guys are all very serious learners. You're always looking to learn more, to grow in the industry and in life in general. So we'd love to hear a little bit from each of you, whether it's specific to short-term rentals or whatever. Favorite podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts and a number of different topics, but especially in short-term rentals. So any favorite podcasts and or books that you would recommend?
Kind of drew a blank. I mean, I'm a big Darren Hardy fan. I like The Compound Effect. I think that book impacted me. Podcasts. I think it's called A Better Life with Brandon Turner. I'm a big fan of that. He talks about real estate, but he's also more Christian-based. He was a big part of Bigger Pockets. I'm sure people are at Bigger Pockets. He started his own podcast, and it's more faith-based, but also talks a lot about investing and things like that. So I really enjoy that. It's probably my number one go-to.
Good.
This is kind of outing me. I only listen to pop culture podcasts, so I'll just go with the book question. My favorite book I've ever read is called The Prodigal God. It's by Timothy Keller. So it's not really a self-help book. It's more a faith-based book. But that's a really good book.
And if you have to sum it up in 1 or 2 sentences, why it's your favorite, what would it be?
Well, it talks about the story of the prodigal son, and it talks about it from a completely flipped perspective of how we've always heard the story. And I'm an oldest, and so it just really kind of hit me upside the head because, it talks about how the oldest was so upset that the youngest got all these things. And when I look at that story and I'm like, if one of my younger siblings got their inheritance early and spent it all and then came back for more, it'd be pretty hard for me not to be upset about that. So it kind of talks through that story. Yeah.
One of my favorite books is called The Go-Giver. Generosity overall is just very important to me. Yeah, the book called Go-Giver. Generosity is a big deal. This goes in every area of life, and I just love the concept of always giving more in value than you're taking in money from people, or even with your kids or your spouse. Just always providing more value than what you're taking. And this goes especially in the Airbnb industry, I think, because just some examples of that would be, like the toiletries and the things you're providing in the house, always more than what they need, just different things like that. But yeah, I love that book and the whole concept of giving. And then also teaching, learning and teaching, continuously learning, and pass that on. What you learn, teach it to the next generation, the next person.
The Go-Giver and the Compound Effect, I really enjoyed both of those books. Right now I'm reading Gap in the Game, so pick that one up. And honestly, I'm not a real big reader, like people think I should be, but yeah, those that's what I'm reading right now. And there's one that I was thinking of and I just drew a blank, so apparently I wasn't supposed to tell you about that one.
If you think about it later, you can tell me. I might add these to the Okay, how about a big hand for these guys?
I'm so sorry. I had one more thing that was important that I wanted to pitch tonight, and I did not get a chance. So I think a lot of you guys have Airbnbs. If you have Airbnbs, this is specific to the market in this area. Another interesting thing that I found when I was running comps for tonight, I had 2 properties, very similar properties, and the one had a pool and the one did not. And the difference in the gross income for the year was staggering. So I know you added a pool. This does not need to turn into a big conversation, but just very quickly, these 2 properties sleep the same amount of people. The one with the pool overall, when you take the gross numbers from the entire year, only performed 11% better than the one without the pool. But in the summer months, it performed 30% better. So basically, if the one, that's to say like both were great listings, but because of the pool, it performed better in the summer. So I shared these comps with the owner of the property that didn't have the pool, and he's putting a pool in because it's going to make 30% more in the summer. So it's pretty easy to pay off your pool if you're making 30% more on your numbers. I don't know if this holds true for you, but just if you need a tax write-off, consider a pool.
Very good. I love it. Okay, awesome. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you for your input. I'll probably share all your contact information on the email tomorrow, unless you don't want me to reach out to you. Yeah, just a lot for one evening. So, but, thanks again. Okay, now I'm officially wrapping up for tonight. Thanks for coming out.